Well, hello, Savvy Beauties. Welcome to Clean Beauty Scene. I am Kelly Banana, your host, eco lifestyle and wellness coach. I am so excited to welcome Marquita L of L's Wellness to Clean Beauty Scene. We're going to have a fantastic conversation. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
So for those of you, this is just going to be a great conversation. We're going to have fun. We're so like-minded. So we're going to talk about a lot of the fun stuff, but really a topic that I haven't talked much about on the show. And I was so excited when you approached me because I literally, you know how the universe works. I was thinking, okay, I've got to bring this more to the forefront. And my podcast is my vehicle for these things. And then when I got your interview form, I thought, okay, this is going to be great. So a really important conversation. And so for those of you who are listening on the podcast or on YouTube, all the links we talk about are going to be in the show notes. So let me introduce our wonderful guest here. St. Louis-based NBC-Health and wellness coach Marquita L. unknowingly found her purpose over 20 years ago, following the death of her grandmother. She was drawn to a deepened understanding of how family history and lifestyle choices impacted overall health. And more importantly, she wanted to equip herself with the necessary tools of prevention and preparedness. So since 2007, Marquita has been on a mission to heal, empowering clients for more than 15 years to learn their bodies, love themselves, and take control of their health. And with a more holistic approach to healing in recent years, Marquita is clearing a natural path to sustained weight loss, stress loss, and peace of mind. Welcome. I am so excited. We are so like-minded. And wow, you've been doing this a long time. I mean, since, before everyone was on the internet. I mean, we were on the internet in 2007, but not like we are now. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
So I'd love for you to tell a little bit more about your story and, with your grandmother, that's what hit you and you realized, wait a minute, we have to make some changes in our lifestyle. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it was really more just kind of a curiosity while I was in college. And at the time I was taking a nutrition course. So I just kind of used that, to my benefit. And I would just reach out to the professor. Sometimes I would just ask a couple questions after class in regard to, family history, lifestyle, what types of things actually contribute to, certain issues when it comes to health and wellness. And that's really where my interest was piqued because typically, growing up in the average household, you're not really pursuing health on purpose. You think back to your childhood, and unless you're actually in a space where your parents are really grounded in health, wellness, or fitness, for the most part, you recall your childhood from a space of, oh, well, yeah, I just kind of, we went outside, we played, we ate dinner, but you really didn't center things around the conversation or importance of what it really means to be healthy. And so after college, it was still in the back of my mind, but it wasn't, close enough to the forefront that I really took a leap until a couple years later. And that's when I really decided, I said, you know what, I think I'm going to go ahead and pursue this lane. And that's when I took the steps to become certified as a personal trainer. And that's when I really began my journey within a gym setting. And after, I would say, maybe about the first year, what I realized was the people who needed me most in the gym setting weren't necessarily the ones that I expected to train the most often. I came into the gym kind of with that same mentality that a lot of new trainers have, which is like, you're coming in training athletes, or you're, training people who were running track in college and things like that. But what I really found was the client base for me that really needed me was women who were just not giving themselves enough time, mothers, retirees, just busy, not really having enough time to focus on their health. And so that was where I said, you know what, I think I'm home. I think this is the space that really says I have found my purpose within this space.
Oh, that's wonderful. And I love it's true. I mean, especially, we women, we put ourselves in the back burner. And
Mhm.
that's a big mission of mine too. It's like, you got to take care of yourself. Plus, you really can't take care of others or love others
Mhm.
the way you really want to, unless you're loving yourself and taking care of yourself. I mean, it is true, but it's so hard to conceptualize that. And
Right.
it doesn't take a ton of work. A little bit of self-nurturing, it goes a long way,
Mhm.
and
Absolutely.
I really like the holistic approach you take, and that's what I do too. That's why, like we were talking about it, like clean beauty for me is holistic beauty, and it's beauty from the inside out, and it's health from the inside out. If
Yeah.
so I like your approach, and I know you're big on stress management, stress,
Mhm.
because stress is really the root of it is correlates to almost all disease, aging, premature aging, right? and
Oh,
and like skin issues, and just even it shoots down into your body. Our minds can only take so much, so it creates illness. But even like aches and pains and like anything that's going on with me, I know it's stress. Like I had
yeah.
TMJ really bad years ago. My jaw came out of joint, my back, something, it's like it can always anything. And then I'm like, okay, I gotta practice what I preach.
That's it. That's
And
it.
so what is your when it comes to healthcare and mitigating stress. I always say we can't really reduce a lot of stress. Where you can, fine, but sometimes it's just managing it and perceiving it, and it is
Mhm.
all connected. So how do you see that it really impacts your skin? Because we're women, and most of my
Mhm.
listeners are women, and I always say when you feel better you look better, when you look better you feel better. And
Mhm.
stress, people don't realize that the things that are coming out on your skin, you can really trace a lot of it back to stress. So how
Absolutely.
does it impact? How do you
Yeah.
see it?
Well, stress greatly impacts skincare, in the same way that it impacts every other major organ in our body, and our skin is the largest of all. So I would say our skin is probably the most greatly impacted by stress, because you just have so many opportunities to to impact it. And from an inside out standpoint, we are what we eat, we are what we think, we are how we stress. And stress care is skincare. When you care for your stressors, you are in turn caring for your skin, you're caring for your heart, you're caring for everything else that really centers you and brings you into alignment. Now, for a lot of people, we first have to acknowledge that stress lives here. We also have to become more aware of exactly what that means to every individual person. And that comes down to really paying attention to your stressors, paying attention to your stress triggers, paying attention to how you respond to stress, what environments you're in that cause those responses, what people you're around that cause those responses, what thoughts you're having, what life events are going on that are causing these disruptions within your body that are also now translating into breakouts or blemishes, or just inconsistencies that you're seeing in the body that you just can't get a handle on.
eczema
Yeah,
eczema yeah.
that's exactly it, and so it just kind of comes back to taking a step back and actually acknowledging that stress in a lot of cases is showing up in ways that you just didn't realize. You thought that pimple was because you touched your face, but in
Exactly.
reality, you may have been stressing out because you have an exam. And now knowing that stress really does play such a huge role, it greatly impacts and actually improves your overall health and wellness when you reserve space for it.
Yes, it's so true. And you brought up a good point, paying attention and figuring out, because it's so easy to just go along in life and you're not even realizing the things that, because I think, don't you think that's kind of like the first step? What is causing the stress? Then you can more handle it in a better way. And it's so true. People think that, yeah, that blemish, that maybe that, like, oh, my shoulder's hurting, like even certain things, even like, even more serious illness, it can all be traced back to stress. So
Absolutely.
other than like, so paying attention and thinking, like you said, people, I mean, yeah, health is what we're eating, what we're breathing, our thoughts, like you mentioned, so
Mhm.
important, and who we're hanging around with. It's true.
Absolutely.
I'm always like, no toxic products, no toxic people. Like it's like a golden rule,
That
right? So
is
what's
that's
just something that just basic, I like to always give actionable tips to my listeners and my viewers, because you get this information, it's kind of okay, like where do I start? Like a woman out there listening, and she knows
true.
she's stressed out and there's so much going on and she feels a little overwhelmed. Like what's one thing that you would say to her to do, other than kind of paying attention, and maybe she's focusing and she's realizing, okay, like something going on at work or something going on at home, but what's something
Mhm.
she can do to help herself?
I would say first off to give yourself permission to be stressed. A lot of times we try our best to suppress our stress, to minimize our stress, and to deny our stressors, and that actually causes much more just havoc and chaos within our mind and within our bodies, and it just kind of exacerbates all of those other issues and components. So I would say one of the most difficult things to do is to let your stress exist, acknowledge your stress. Don't try to hide your stress. There's no shame in stress. Everyone stresses. We're just trying to get to the root cause of why your stressors are happening as often as they are, and ultimately trying to find a solution that allows you to live a more balanced life.
I love that. It's so true. And not having judgment. When we judge something, it actually makes it worse. and
Mhm.
and yeah, exactly, give yourself grace. I mean, especially the last year and a half we've had, but any time in life, I really like that.
Mhm.
Allow it. And also, that I love that, that saying, like the only way out is through. Sometimes you
Yep.
just feel it. And that's another thing. I know you work with women and I work with women too, and it's, the emotional eating or turning to things. Sometimes if you just feel it and then you feel it and it can pass,
Mhm.
but bearing it is what makes
Mhm.
it mount and mount and mount.
Absolutely.
And I really like the work you do with, stress management and health, with Black women's health, in particular. So I
Mhm.
really would love to talk about that because, you know, as we were talking about before, this has come to my attention. And again, I mean, look, I don't know enough about this topic, but more and more, especially with what's gone on in, our social climate in the last year with Black Lives Matter, a lot has come to the forefront, and there is so much awareness, which I think is really great. But one thing that really just, oh, I mean, injustice just really, oh my God, it's just one of my big pet peeves. I don't know what I was in a past life, but I'm all for justice and fairness. And I didn't realize that Black women, Black people, they're not getting the healthcare they deserve, and the wellness, and so what I'd love for you to speak on that a little bit and tell us what's really going on and what
Oh,
the
absolutely.
realities are.
Yeah.
And then of
Yeah.
course what we can maybe do about it. But first,
Yeah. Absolutely.
what's the climate? Like what is it for?
Well, thank you for asking. And I would say the first thing is that, as you mentioned, a lot of the things that you aren't aware of are on purpose, right? The system was created for the comfort of white people.
Mm.
And so comfort means if you're protected from a lot of the injustices that other marginalized groups have been facing for decades and decades, it will make it a lot easier for you to not see exactly what's going on, and to not feel, right? Because feeling is what really moves us into action. And so when you have things like redlining, you have things like denying the rights of people to move into certain neighborhoods, you create separation of culture. And so where you have separation of culture, you aren't able to see a lot of those things firsthand, and it makes it a lot easier to kind of go through life in a state of ignorance in a way, and it
Yeah.
allowed you to kind of remain in a space of comfort that really impacts everyone. You're impacted differently, but cultural separation also creates a much more indifferent sense of a feeling when it comes to other things that are going on. less empathy, less sympathy, less, camaraderie. All of those things together are the perfect weather for what has been created for hundreds of years ultimately. And as we know with womanhood, the male patriarchy has also impacted the women's movement and women's rights. And, the average woman, if you were to ask, how well versed is your husband on women's rights, most women would say not as much as I would have liked, right? So, you can live with a woman, you can love a woman, you can have a daughter, and you can still be a man who's ignorant to the plight of women. That applies to other women, right? You can be a woman and you can still be ignorant to the plights of other groups of women outside of yourself. And so that's one of the natural occurrences with Black women, especially, is that we tend to suffer silently because the rest of the world either can't relate or doesn't care enough to really consider that there are areas and spaces that create disproportionate levels of, body fat, stress in the body that makes us more likely to acquire high blood pressure at an earlier age, and just things that really live in our tissues from generations past that are still here from a psychological standpoint, physiological, environmental, and just ultimately all of the intersections that come along with not only race, but gender. That's the uniqueness and the complexity for Black womanhood, is that for the average woman, you can relate to the complexities of womanhood. For the average Black man, he can relate to the complexities of race. But for the Black woman, we have a double-edged sword where they meet, in that while we have to also tend to racism, we are also tending to sexism. And there's a constant struggle to either be heard, to be seen, to be protected, to be validated, or to be considered. And so for that reason, that is the group that needs all of us most. And so that is the group that I center my program around.
That is, we need more of that. And that's, you made such a good point. It's the ignorance, and then the ignorance begets the ignorance. And that's what has to stop. And like you said, generations, it gets in our, it's amazing. That's another topic that I think is very fascinating, how the ancestral, what's going on, what even happened with your generations past affects you now.
Absolutely.
And I mean, if you think about that and the cruelty, for all these years, and it's like women they're dealing with the race issue and the gender issue. So it's such a double-edged sword. So, I mean, what change do you want to see?
Well, I would really hope that more people who are unaffected want to see change. I think change happens when those who are unaffected care enough to take those action steps. So as a person who would be affected, my hope would be that others who aren't as affected care enough and are curious enough to take those action steps to figure out what it will take to actually see the change that needs to happen.
Yes. So what is something that we can do?
Well, I would say the challenge is for you to care enough to be curious enough. Whatever those steps look like, that becomes the responsibility of those who aren't affected. For example, a parent who has a child who at 5 years old has a severe food allergy. Within a week, that parent becomes an expert on food allergies, right? Not because they were a year ago, but because at that point, they cared enough about a person that they saw who was hurting. They became curious enough about taking whatever steps were needed to figure out a solution to the problem. And that's what I would say in this case, is that if you're a person who cares enough about the injustices of others, you'll seek the information that's necessary for you to take the action steps. Yeah,
which is kind of what I'm trying to do. And, we're all just learning. And, it's interesting because, so I have couple business coaches, and one I've worked with, she's a business coach for health coaches. She's been a very successful health coach for many years, Michelle Leota. In fact, she's got a fantastic program. I know most of my listeners aren't health coaches, but you might have some people in your community. She hates the injustice of, like, she's like, there's not enough Black women, and well, I mean men too, but women, mostly it's women who are health coaches. I mean, and she really would love to see more men in it, but she's like, there's definitely not enough Black women and BIPOC women. So she has a program, a scholarship program for her whole, that she awards to BIPOC women. So I'll put a link to that in the show notes for anybody listening who, it's a fantastic program, and I would like to see that too. It's just,
and I'm glad that you mentioned that. Yeah, because you're spot on in the underrepresentation within the healthcare industry, which also directly correlates to a lot of the health disparities that Black women have. We are naturally inclined to care and relate more to those who we have a likeness to. That's a natural affinity bias that research has supported. If a man goes into a workspace where there's 90% men, he automatically feels more comfortable. If, he goes in to do an interview and there's 4 men in the room, he at least knows that they can relate to maleness. If nothing else, they can relate to maleness. And that translates all across every industry. And so any space where there's an underrepresentation, when we're walking in, we have a fear of not only disconnect, but also just a lack of knowledge or willingness in digging deeper to further understand what it is that we may need that's separate from womanhood. There are questions that you may need to ask that you wouldn't necessarily ask of another woman, or things that you would consider in certain situations that if you don't really have that cultural competence that really creates the connecting points that are necessary to really fully service people, it's hard for us to really gain the help and support that we need. So right now, I want to say Black women make up about 10% of the health and wellness coaches right now in the industry. So my hope, as well as yours, would be that number doubles and triples in the near future. And things like what you just said, visibility and advocacy, letting the world know, like, this is a space that right now is underrepresented, and we definitely need to fix.
Right, exactly. And, even if everybody does something, even if it's small, I mean, we have to make change somehow. Because I think a lot of people, they think, well, I don't know enough, or I don't know what to do. It's like, and like you said, just get curious and treat it like, there was a good analogy about the allergies. I mean, there's a lot of things. Like, thinking about so many things you don't know about, you're ignorant about. If you need to know, you will. I was, and whatever we can do to bring some focus on the problem in the situation. So, as we're talking, and one idea I had was, I could offer a scholarship to BIPOC women for my program. Like, what do you think of that? Do you think something like that? And tell the reason I'm doing it, because there's a disproportionate,
Well, yeah, that absolutely would be a huge step. And even further than that, I would say it really starts with a belief system. For so long, the idea of overcoming injustice has been rooted in behavior. What can I do? And it really comes down to, who can I be? Who can I be today that I was not yesterday or the day before? Showing up as a different person comes along with different action steps. It becomes more a matter of wanting to tend to the people, as opposed to what is it that I can give, or what can I do to lessen the blow, in a sense. So you want to really make it personal. When you make it personal, and when you care enough, and this goes back to the cultural separation. There's a cultural disconnect in the country that makes it a lot easier to not care enough. That's really what it comes down to. And when you don't care enough about what's going on with other groups, you get to decide how much you care. You get to decide when you care. But when you really root it and ground it into a belief, that belief really drives you and moves you in a way that you really never have to ask again, what can I do?
Exactly.
You're moved into action. And whatever those action steps look like, it might be believing the plight of the marginalized group. It might be not taking their experiences personally. It might be not having to defend whiteness, not having to explain anything other than, I care, I'm here, I trust you, thank you, and I hope at some point you trust me. So it just gets back to humanity, the human-centered way of thinking that has been lost a bit.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, one of the things, so I grew up in Los Angeles. I still live, near Los Angeles, like in a little suburb. So I grew up in Los Angeles. It's just different out here. It's more progressive. It's more like there was, so I remember years ago when I was a very young adult, a friend of mine, she was from the South, and what she's like, it was what she explained there, the social climate. I was flabbergasted. I mean, my jaw was on the floor. I'm like, and this was in the 90s. And I was like, it's the 90s. What are it really? So that really opened my eyes, because here in Los Angeles, it's just more progressive. It's more, there's not as much. I mean, it's there, but it's just more, you know what I mean? And so that really opened up my eyes. And then,
and I like what you said, is that, perspective, right? Your perspective and experience is really all based around what you've lived and what you see. And so while on paper, the space may be more progressive, but for those marginalized groups, those experiences are not.
exactly.
And that's really the space now to just kind of take a step back and say, well, my experience feels good, but it's supposed to. Again, going back to white supremacy and the patriarchy, the goal is for you to think things have gotten better. And so if you, as white culture, think things have gotten better, then you don't feel like there's as much work to do. And you may even question why there's still as much conversation being had. And so now we say, challenge yourself outside of your space and outside of your experiences, and start to dig into those other spaces and say, wow, well, if this is still going on, if I'm still seeing this on TV, even though I'm not seeing it in my neighborhood, there might be some steps that I need to take outside of my own personal bubble that really allow me to relate, understand, sympathize, and take action toward whatever area needs the rest of us.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, I think that if people just keep an open mind and really, like you said, you got to acknowledge, like there, and right now, as we are recording this in 2021, there is no excuse really for anyone to not realize that, you know what I'm saying? I mean, it's, we're here.
Well, I mean, honestly speaking, it's really, the reality is that it's much easier for a man to be sexist than to be non-sexist, not because of intent, but because the system was designed that way.
Yeah.
And you have cultural and societal norms over time that every generation inherits. And so naturally, it becomes bigger than a person's intent. And I think once we kind of bring the conversation to whether or not a person should be racist, a bigger, more important question is, what can we do to dismantle the systems that created racism? So it's not about individual people. When you focus on the system, that's when you can really get to work. When you focus on the actions of people, that's where you get distracted.
Yes. I've talked about this on the podcast a few times before. You've mentioned the white male patriarchy. I have no patience for it. I'm like, ooh. And I feel like things are changing a little bit toward that. I mean, the Me Too movement certainly helped that a bit, or maybe more than just a bit, but it's just like, it has to change. And I think more and more people have no patience for it anymore.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I wish having no patience actually meant something for us, but it as women from a system standpoint, the patriarchy is just much bigger than that. It's the infrastructure of our country. It's what our country was built on, from our education system, to our healthcare system, to our judicial system. Every system that we have in place was created at the hands of male
Oh,
patriarchy. And so what we're doing now is again saying what are things that we can do in the same way that I would say the challenge is for the unaffected to step up. I would also say that in regard to male patriarchy. This is also a situation where we challenge more men to be more vocal about the injustices that women are still facing, about the disparities that women
yes.
are still having in every space. And so any group that's unaffected, but is also benefiting from the system, has a responsibility that's much greater to do what they can in any way to help to bridge that gap.
Yeah. And it's clearly going to take a long time, but
Mhm.
and maybe I'm just being too hopeful, but I feel like it will because of the awareness, but also, the younger generations are more enlightened. And from what I do have two teenage boys, and I have a lot of colleagues that are much younger, and I feel like the tide can turn, but it's going to take almost a new, these future generations, these new generations.
Mhm. Well, yeah, I'm glad you said that. Just as far as the newer generations that just kind of weren't born into the some of the traditional generational comforts of baby boomers and those who are even say 50 plus. A lot of the reputation based behaviors and beliefs that has really gotten us to where we are is also a part of the complacency that for much of white culture has led to just kind of looking away or not wanting to get involved or
Mm,
remaining more comfortable as opposed to really taking those steps that might not look good and might not feel good, but are the right things to do. And so I think you're right in that this newer generation is much more vocal and much less tolerant to a lot of
yes.
those. But we also have whoever is still here with a heartbeat is still as responsible. And so while you may not have grown up in a space that was as proactive, you still have the ability now to move differently than you did before. So if you're still here and you're still breathing, 30, 40, 50, 60 years old, your responsibility remains the same.
Exactly.
Less a matter of not being sexist as a man. It's more a matter of challenging yourself outside of the systems that were already in place. The same with racism. It's less a matter of you being racist as a white person and more a matter of recognizing the systems that were in place before you ever got here. And so when you focus on the system, you actually take it less personally. And that's where we can
Yeah.
actually get to work. It's not about you, it's about the system, right? It's not about maleness, it's about the system that created the male patriarchy that benefited men as opposed to women. And so when we have men now being able to have those conversations and take action steps, they take it less personally. And when we have our white people saying, you know what, this isn't about me. It's not about whether or not I'm biased. It's not about what racisms I harbor. It's about these systems that are impacting other people. So when it's about me, I can put that on the back burner. But right now, there's work to do to dismantle these systems. And that allows us to, it's less distracting when you don't make it about you because you never have to
Yes.
defend yourself. You never
Yes.
have to use the I statement, right? When you use
Ah,
the I
yes.
statement too often, you're making it about you. And that's when you take a step
Oh
back
my
and say,
gosh.
oh,
Yes. Yes.
this isn't about me. This is about racism. That means it's about the system. So let me go at the system with everything I have. Let me understand the system, right? Because that's the other side of it. It's like you really never had to get to know the system because it's always worked for you. We normally look for stuff when things go wrong, the way
Yes.
I mentioned about the
Right.
food.
Right.
You're not really researching something when everything's going well. You research it when you take the medication and you get a rash. Now you want to go online and you're trying to figure out what the side
Yeah.
effects are. Well, that's the same thing here. Those systems are designed for you to not ask questions because they're working for you. So now when you take yourself out of the situation and you say, well, it might be working for me, but
Yeah.
if Marquita's saying it's not working for her, I get to believe her outside of my own experience. And because I believe her, I'm going to take the same action steps that would be necessary for her to get that same care that I'm already getting.
I love how you put that. And I mean, this is really an important point. You guys rewind if you're, jogging or driving or whatever, because I honestly, Marquita, the way you described that, I've never heard it described that. That really landed with me. And I think that is the crux of it. People take it too personally. So
Absolutely.
they're like, well, I'm not racist. I got, it's not about you. It's about the system and the society, the culture, everything's going to, that is so well put. Wow. Thank you so much for clarifying that. And it's the same thing, yeah, with the gender. And the other thing is, this is another thing that really irritates me is when people say, well, but we've come a long way, but there's really not, the problem really isn't that big. Like to deny it, that I really have no tolerance for,
Well,
like.
but as you said, when we really just open up the conversation, it's more understandable for a person to think we've come a long way based on the protections that they've had and based on the environments that they've lived in.
Yeah.
The white patriarchy was created to protect whiteness. And so by protecting whiteness, it also means you have to create separation. So we can't be mistreating people right in your face, right? So this is where we have suburbs that were built, but no one else could live. That's our purpose. So we're mistreating them across town, but you're here with a white picket fence. So if you see it on the news, you get to justify that, well, they deserved it, right? So these are all things that were created before you ever existed. So when you get to take a step outside of it and say, oh, okay, I had no idea that was actually in place before I was ever born. Now you get to work figuring out, okay, well, let me look into the neighborhood that I live in right now. Let me see, what was that neighborhood 30 years ago? Okay, let me see, when was the first time that a family of color was allowed to move in? Okay, let me see. And now you start to take steps backward and you say, oh, okay, I get it now.
Yes.
If my family was able to move in the 1950s and your family wasn't able to move in until the 1980s, there's a 30-year gap between the ability to actually become a homeowner and to generate wealth. And so those are the nuances that, unless you can remove yourself from the situation, you really aren't able to really go at that type of information unless you can kind of separate who you are from what the problem is. The problem is the racist systems that were in place. And when you focus there, you'll actually get a lot further.
Exactly. I just think that is so well said. When you separate and don't take it personally, it's like we collectively we can tackle this together. And it's oh, I love it. I love it. Thank you. That was really.
Thank you for opening up the conversation again. These are the types of conversations that the more that we have, the further we get. You can take your conversation into a space that allows someone else to get it. Like you just said, it's a domino effect. If you caught that and you felt like, wow, I never heard it that way. And then you give that to someone else and they say, oh, I never looked at it that way. Well, 10 people down the line, a lot can happen.
Absolutely.
Change mindsets and change perspectives. Sometimes it's just a matter of not the message, but the messenger.
So my niece is biracial. I mean, obviously we're white and her father is Black. And, it's like, what world is she going to grow up in? It can't be the same. It just can't. And
I love
the point where it cannot, like, we have no choice. It can't. The change is, that's it. And like you said, tolerance, we cannot tolerate it anymore. Really. That's the bottom line.
That's it. And so, and as you said, when you believe something, you move in that way. And that's when you'll know. And I'll say this honestly, comfort is a hard thing to overcome.
Oh yeah.
Comfort is a hard thing to overcome. And that goes for, male comfort, that goes for white comfort, that goes for straight comfort, every group of people that has ever in any way just had the benefit of being comfortable. Everyone hasn't had that benefit. And when you've had it for generations and generations, to see chaos going on around you that you're not affected by, you don't like to see it, but you're not necessarily moved to help, and to help enough. There's always steps that can be taken, but there's typically going to be steps that leave you feeling like you're conflicted about whether or not you're stepping into a space that you really don't know what it's going to look like on the other side. And that's normally where true change happens. When you're unsure, when you're afraid, when it feels a little tense, that's when you know things are getting done. So it's going to be so it's a process, but most importantly, it starts with you. Who you are is going to impact what your next steps are.
Absolutely. Very well said. Well, this was a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much. This is, I'm so excited for listeners and you guys listening. Let's get the conversation going. Feedback, tag us on Instagram. Really, let's, and it all starts, you got to start somewhere.
Absolutely. I love that. Yeah. Get the conversation going. Yeah. If I could give any suggestion or challenge, I would say, have these conversations in your white spaces. When you're sitting around, just have conversations. It's just like I was saying about stress, how it's like we know stress is here. We just don't like to talk about it. And we don't like to say that it's happening, right? It's the same thing. It's just our natural response. We just don't always do well in uncomfortable situations. But once we push through and we see what's on the other side, it's like, wow, it was worth it all along. And this is no different. So start to get into the practice of bringing up conversations that don't necessarily feel good amongst your groups. And that's where you really feel that sense of authentic and organic willingness to figure out what that next step looks like.
Exactly. Well, that is a wonderful, and now where can people find you?
Oh, yes. Well, you can find me at my website, ellswellness.com, ELLSWELLNESS.com. Also on Instagram, Els_wellness. You can catch me on Facebook at Els Wellness. Let me see. You can catch me on TikTok, Els_wellness. And let me go one more with Twitter, Els_wellness. So I'm pretty much every social media platform I pretty much got locked up. So you can, take your pick and I'm out there. So come see me.
And we will, of course, link all of that in the show notes. But yeah. So are you ready for my fun rapid fire questions?
I am. I'm always ready for these rapid fires. I never know what's coming.
Are you a dog person or a cat person?
I would definitely say I'm a cat person, but I enjoy dogs. But if I have to pick,
okay,
yeah, I'll take a cat any day. Yeah, I just love their independence. Yeah.
Yes. And are you a morning person or a night person?
Okay, if I have to, okay, I will say this. From a workspace, I'm more of a morning person. Like my brain really lights up early in the morning. And so I do tend to get the most done earlier in the morning. But when it comes to like just winding down and chilling out, yeah, I definitely prefer when the sun goes down. So if it's about work, give me the morning. But if it's just about me, then I'm a night person.
The nightlife, yeah. Yeah, it's so nice. I love that too. Just kind of winding down the day. I've always been a night person, but I'm the same way. And when I'm, the mornings are great too. I'm trying to make myself more of a morning person. I mean, I was forced into it when I had kids. It's like, because even my career before kids was in network television, and my hours, you didn't have to be there at 8 a.m. And in fact, sometimes you were there until 11 or p.m.
Exactly. Yep, you said it. I totally agree. It's just it depends.
Yeah. So what is your one non-negotiable, the one thing that really for your health and wellness moved the needle and is your non-negotiable?
I would say two things: water and movement. Yeah. Because you can't live without them, either one. Like it's not about whether or not I like water, it's about water liking me. And so the same thing with movement. It's like when the body stops moving, I don't want my body to think I'm done.
Oh my
So
gosh, right?
those, you know what I mean? Like those are two things that no matter what's going on, like have to be done. And I said movement because I didn't say exercise. I didn't say going to the gym. I just said move. That's it. Like if I just walk back and forth, if I just do a couple high knees or raise my arms, like I just want my body to know that that's it.
Just move.
Like
Like I stand when I do my podcast episode.
yeah. It's just like as long as those two things are happening, I feel like the body at least knows, like it knows I'm here and it knows I care. Like
Yes. Oh wow. You are a girl after my own heart. I'm the same way. Guys, just move. It's not about 2 hours at the gym. Move. And it doesn't have to be time consuming or exactly. That's why I like the Fitbit, the whole 10,000 steps a day. That's a good thing just because we're not meant to be sedentary, and a body in motion stays in motion. Yeah, that's and of course water. Yeah, it's amazing how dehydrated people are. They don't realize it. That's
that's it. Both of those things. But hey, if you're not moving, you might not be thirsty as often. So it goes hand in hand. If you move more, you might get more thirsty. You might drink more water. It's a domino effect.
And people think like, I know I need to drink water and I need to move, but most people are not doing either near enough.
Yeah, that's it. Well, those are my non-negotiables, so I definitely am.
That's great. I love it. Well, thank you so much. This was fantastic. We'll have to have you back on again. I think
Please do.
talk about it for sure.
Time flies when you're having fun.
And you guys listening, definitely, and watching, tag us on Instagram or Facebook or wherever. Let's, really, I'm serious. Get this conversation going or continue it. This is what it's going to take, us all being vocal and curious and doing. And I'm going to put the link in the show notes to Michelle's program for scholarship and to my scholarship and to, of course, all of your where people can connect with you as well. All right, you guys, thank you so much for listening and watching, and stay healthy, be well, and be present.